I would say the people who are claiming that they want to live for 200 are not usually the one that come up with bullshit solution, because no bullshit solution is going to bring you anywhere.
Most people think aging is something that happens later in life, but in reality, it's happening right now, at the level of our cells, quietly, gradually, often unnoticed. The real question is, can we influence that process? Or are we simply observing it unfold? Today's conversation explores just that. We will go from understanding what aging really means to the science of longevity molecules, to the bigger question of whether we are truly advancing longevity or just getting better at talking about it. Joining me today is Francois Xavier Pellay, a scientist and entrepreneur working at the intersection of biology, aging, and longevity innovation. This is Brighter 100 from Longeny, and I am Anil K.C. Let's explore what it really means to influence how we age. Francois, welcome to the show.
Hi, Anil. Thank you very much for inviting me.
When we talk about aging, what is actually happening at the cellular level?
Right. So aging is a pretty complex biological phenomenon. It occurs at every level of organization. And so if you're thinking about cells, you're already at a specific smaller scale. But basically the problem happens at every scale. And it's really a problem of complexity. And I like to say that aging is as complex as biology itself. So aging basically have an effect on every aspect of the cellular organization. So you can think about the DNA, you can think about the proteins, you can think about the mitochondria that produce energy, you can think about, every aspect of it gets to some extent damaged with time. And that's what we call aging. And because all of these elements are interconnected and are interdependent, then this is what gives the complexity of the phenotype of aging, and also why it makes it necessary to target aging under several. Aging is the accumulation of problems, and at different level of organization inside a body or cells that occurs with time.
But what you're saying is it's not a single process.
It's definitely not a single process. No, that's for sure. So yeah, there's historically, there was always several things that were considered being part of aging. But as we know more and more, as scientists, and we understand that this is much more complex than we thought. And a few years back, we went from just people having theories right and left to some kind of unifying approach of it. It's called hallmarks of aging, right? And it kind of tried to define, it's still evolving itself, right? But try to define what are the most important part of this aging process and already there you can see that there's many elements that are involved in the aging process.
So why did you get into aging? What attracted you to biology?
So it is very personal to me. So aging and longevity and biology itself is something that I was interested in as a child. And I grew up in the countryside. I was always interested in nature, in animals, in plants, in everything. And I think way too soon, I started to ponder over my own death and basically start to be really concerned about the aging process, because I'm lucky enough to have grown in a family where people are rather healthy, but aging doesn't make exception. Everybody age, right? So this is something that since childhood, I wanted to go into this direction. And back then there were not so much that was known. We knew some, but a lot of things have been found out since.
Why does cellular function matter more than chronological age?
Well, this notion of chronological age versus biological age, that's basically what you're talking about right now. This is a concept that is extremely popular now. And it basically to explain something that we don't necessarily age linearly, first of all. So our chronological age just means how many years have passed since the day we were born. So this one is easy. Biological age means that there are differences between peoples, that some people age faster, some people age slower. So I was saying, for example, that in my family, we're quite lucky. We have even centenarians And you can tell even my mom, who is almost 80, she doesn't look 80. She doesn't behave like an 80 years old person because we're lucky enough to have this slower rate of aging. That's what this biological age is about, right? And it also kind of underlined the fact that not only are we different between people, but also our different organs and our different cells can have different rate of aging. And so this is this notion of rate of aging that vary between the different elements of the biological systems that kind of make it it again underline that aging is complex, and you have to understand that to be able to understand it and do something about it.
Right. And in your research, did you come across any specific markers, for example, with families? You just mentioned that, your family, you have centenarians. We've heard a lot about blue zones. So what I want to understand is there also like a blue zone version as far as family identity is concerned with aging?
Yes, I mean, if you're asking if genetic is important when it comes to aging and longevity, definitely, and actually much more than we used to think. So I would say intuitively, already long before we even understand genetics, we knew that some family were living longer and some were living shorter. There's also, I mean, the environment in which different family would live that have an impact, like even your income has an impact on your lifespan. But the genetic itself, the genetic component, is very important. And we used to think that it was only 10, 15, 20%, but now they are saying it's closer to 50%. So based on more recent, and for me, it makes more sense. Like as a scientist, I feel like, yeah, this makes more sense with the way I understand biology. And the reason is simple, that it's not that those genes define aging per se. Those are not aging genes in the classical sense. It's just that they are acting on, those genes are acting on a lot of things. For example, metabolism, and the metabolism itself has an effect on lifespan. It's not it's a side effect basically. And since we're complex organism with a lot of genes that are making us up, so yeah, there's this genetic lottery that makes some people luckier than others, I would say, in that sense.
Right. Yeah, I think we've seen. In fact, there was a French lady, right, who smoked
Yeah.
and drank.
Jeanne Calment, yeah.
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
120 or something.
She's
Yeah.
the record holder for the
Right.
longevity.
Right. So, at what point does aging begin to meaningfully affect how we feel and function?
Oh, yeah, that's also a very good question. I would say we start aging almost from the day we were born. And that's an unusual statement. Like people don't necessarily think about it that way. But once you understand it in the term of systems and wear and tear, among other things, right? You think, okay, that kind of makes sense, right? From the moment we're out in the world, we start breathing, we start eating, there's oxidative damage out of all of that. But the point is, for many years, our repair mechanism are compensating it so well that you can't see almost anything. But you sometimes see even teenagers with white hair. It's not common, but it happens. And you can start seeing the early signs of aging, let's say around 25. We like to say that the optimal age for an adult would be around 25. So from that on, the signs get more and more clear. And the one is, like I said earlier, aging is not linear, it's exponential, which means that the first between 25 and 35, for example, there's not much going on. Like you're aging a little bit, you can see your skin, you can see a few things, but then things get more and more clear. Around 40, you already start to see that it's harder to lose weight, it's harder to train, it's harder to like you start having a few pain here and there. Sometimes it's joints, sometimes it's muscle. This become more and more clear. And as you grow older, you also start to see disease appearing, and some that are called age-related disease, like Parkinson, Alzheimer's, stuff like that. But even some that are not classified as aging disease, they still will not only appear more, but also potentially hurt you. And you got a lot of cases like that, I would say, with COVID. COVID was a good example. COVID is obviously
Right.
not an age-related disease.
Right.
Everybody got it, but you can see who is dying more, right? It's clearly older people, weaker people.
Right.
Biologically speaking, they are weaker, who simply get damaged more by the.
So, is it that immunity starts to decline as wear and tear happens, and that's how you start getting more diseases, or you're more susceptible to a disease as you age?
Well, I mean, this is a big part of it. Like the fact that as you age, all of your system tends to go down. And for example, in the case of immune system, it goes both ways. So you have a part of the immune system that goes down and a part that goes up. The part that goes down is the cellular based, so white blood cells response, the one that is specific. This one goes down, and the inflammation, which is also part of immune system, this one goes up. Kind of a compensation mechanism, probably. And so both of them, I mean, the fact that the immune system goes down, that may make you more susceptible to disease. The fact that inflammation goes up also kind of weaken you more, because this is inflammation damage a lot of things as well. It's like it's a weapon, but it shouldn't be activated randomly. And it's called inflammaging, kind of low level that gets more and more clear with age, that damage a lot of things all over your body. And so there is obviously this aspect of lower immune system, and also, like I said, the fact that the entire system is weaker make you more susceptible of dying of the same disease.
So you mentioned teenagers having gray hair. One of the most obvious signs of someone's aging is their skin. From a visibility perspective, the first thing you notice is actually the skin deteriorating as you age. You've worked extensively with skin aging. What makes skin such a useful model for aging?
Yeah. So skin is, I would say it has good and bad press, in the sense that we all are concerned when we think about aging. Actually, we're thinking about the visual part of it, not only, but also, medical part. But we can't deny that part. We look at ourselves in the mirror and we can see that this is happening, right?
Yes.
And with my skin type, even more so. For that, I'm not lucky, but it's okay. It's not going to kill me. But clearly, skin is an interesting model to answer really your question as a scientist. Because first of all, it's easy to access, it's easy to see. Whatever you do as a treatment on your skin, you're going to see quite easily. If you do the same thing on the brain, it's harder on the liver. So that's one, I would say, one aspect. Another thing is that skin is actually incredibly complex. It's a multi-layer organ that contains a lot of things, much more that most people would think. There's many different cell types. There are different layers that have different cell types. It's connected to the immune system. It's connected to the blood system, obviously, to the basically everything, to the nervous system as well. That's why it's so sensitive. So it's a very complex organ. So as such, it's like a mini version of a human in some ways, right? So it makes it quite interesting, I would say, to study. And because it has impact on, basically a lot of people, it also, I think, something that can motivate people to go into caring more for their health. So they might do it for, vanity reason, for aesthetic reason, but at the end, they will end up being healthier. So if you tell people that if you sleep better, if you eat better, if you exercise, not only you will be healthier, but you will look better. That's actually a very good, and this was shown, like a psychological study that shows that if you put that in front of them, like, people care about looking good more than they care about staying healthy. And
Feeling
that's
good.
crazy, but that's a fact.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think aesthetics matter a lot to people. What does skin, or rather, does skin aging reveal something deeper about the biological processes that are happening? When you look at someone's skin, are you able to say that these are the biological processes that are having an impact?
Yeah, it's not exactly as clear as that, but like I said earlier, the organs in the body and every aspect in the body are interconnected. So if you're sick for any other reason, you will see it on the skin to some extent, not to the point that you can diagnose someone, but you would see that if they have, especially if it's a long-term disease or an inflammatory disease, then you will see it on the skin. In that sense, like health towards skin, that is pretty obvious and known for a long time. What people didn't necessarily know so much, but it's getting more and more popular now, and there's good science behind it to show it. It's like I said, the skin is a complex organ that has a lot of function. Primary function, of course, is to protect us from the environment. As such, it's also interesting because we have the intrinsic aging, so the one that concerns all of our organ, and the extrinsic aging, which is due to the environment. So sun, pollution, and well, that's mostly these two actually for the skin. So basically, the skin itself has biological roles, and if the skin age faster than it should for any reason, if that's your weak link, then that will have an impact on the rest of your health as well. So that works. I mean, in the case of the barrier function, the protection of the environment, that's pretty obvious. Like, right? If someone has a somehow porous skin that lets bacteria in, you can imagine that the rate of infection will be higher, right? So that seems to be pretty straightforward. But the skin also play a role in regulation of hormone, especially for women, for example. Like in the lowest layer of the skin, so you have the epidermis, dermis, and basically the fat layer. This one has a hormonal role as well. So in that sense, this also can mess up with a lot of things. So yeah, it goes both ways, right?
So, how closely does external aging reflect the actual internal aging? For example, if I see somebody with more wrinkles, does it also mean that the person has aged a lot internally?
Would say yes and no. So you have two aspects in there. There's clearly a correlation, and the easiest way and a kind of funny way to look at it is that you could train AI to guess someone's age, right, based on their appearance, which means clearly there's a connection between age and appearance. There's no 50 years old that look like 20, to my knowledge. Even the people who are trying so hard, doing so many things and claiming that they have biological age of 25, but you
Right.
look at them, you're like, no, sorry, you don't look like 25.
Unless a lot of cosmetic surgeries.
Yeah, but even with cosmetic, no, and I'm not talking about cosmetic surgeries, but I mean people who just, do like Brian Johnson, for example. Yeah. Brian Johnson is claiming to have a 25 years old
Yeah.
skin. But
We,
I mean,
we
no,
will
I'm a,
we will definitely discuss that. That's something.
okay. So in that sense, yes, it's pretty clear. And not only that it reflects the chronological age, which is already interesting, but it also reflects the biological age. Like, yes, you can tell that someone who aged faster through his skin, and you have seen it actually in your life. You've seen people, especially at the end of their life, like people who suddenly they got sick around 70, for example, and they will unfortunately die within 2 years. You can see it all the way through their entire appearance, like their skin suddenly aged much faster because the entire body is aging faster. So yeah, there is a clear visual cue that someone is. It's not the easiest to read, so people prefer other, like for example, they have walking tests where people
Right.
stand, walk to a wall, and come back. This is
Right.
easier to measure than just skin. But in daily life, and people who work with older people, for sure they know that you can suddenly turn the speed up or down, I guess, I hope, of this rate of aging that you can visually see on the skin.
While we are on skin, are
Mhm.
we underestimating what cosmetic science has already learned about skin and aging?
Well, that's a complex question. I would say that, you use the word cosmetic. So you have cosmetic, you have aesthetic, and then you have something that is still basically just starting, which is I would call it skin biotechnology,
Right.
which is what I do. And cosmetic has been there forever, right? This is in my country, in France, we have like big industry of cosmetic, and cosmetic haven't done much, I would say, to help like the skin get younger. And it's to some extent the aesthetic, which is more medical, right, haven't done much either. And the reason is because they are only focused on the appearance. So they will do everything they can for you to look younger without ever trying to make your skin be younger. So this is like, it's the main fundamental difference. It's like you have your car that is rusty and you paint over it, but you didn't make the car any less rusty. It's just you paint over it. So you don't see
Right.
the rust, but it's still there. Right. So,
Right.
and I would say that there's some progress, but it's not led by the cosmetic or aesthetic. It's the other way around. So the science is leading solutions, and then the aesthetic and cosmetic industry are picking that up and trying to, but very often they just use it for marketing purpose. They just,
So,
they just underline that, oh yeah, it's we are using, I don't know, methylation reversal, blah blah blah, in our cream, which is not possible. But you will see this kind of claims, I would say. But there are a lot of
yes.
progress. I mean, there are some progress that are being made, but somehow slowed down by the fact that these two industries are already existing for a long time and are based only on appearance, not on biology.
So, you were mentioning about biotechnology for skin.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit about that?
I had all this knowledge about skin, and the idea was, what could be the best option at that time was 2020 to really reverse the aging of skin. And the main technology that was available at the time was it's called AFI, autologous fibroblast injection. And it's based on this idea that with age, you're losing cells, you're losing stem cells. And it's also true for the skin, except that the stem cell of the skin are called fibroblasts, right? And so these fibroblasts they have stem function, but they also have like real biological function. Mostly they produce collagen, they produce elastin, they produce hyaluronic acid. And so all these elements that give all the texture, all the elements of the skin itself, right? And you lose these cells with age. It's called stem cell exhaustion theory of aging, right? So you lose these cells. And of course, if you have less of them and if they get older, then all this production of all these very important, crucial elements for skin are running out. And that's why you get wrinkles that appear, that you lose elasticity in your skin, and all the symptoms of skin aging start to appear. So this autologous fibroblast injection technology, the idea is basically to replace these lost cells. So you take a little piece of skin, most often behind the ear, like it's really small, 3 millimeter biopsy. From that, you extract the fibroblast and you will grow them. You will grow from a few hundred in that biopsy, you grow millions of them. And then you will re-inject them back directly into the dermis. So with special needles to make sure that you don't make them too deep, to put them exactly where they belong. So it's your own cells put back where they belong. So of course, the idea is to make the cells younger and healthier before you inject them. So that's the general idea, to get better results. And that works. Like you get reversal, and it's a slow reversal. It's not something that's how you know it's not aesthetic. After the injection, you don't see anything. It takes a few months before you can start, because it takes time for the skin to rebuild itself. And that's really skin rejuvenation, because it's reversal of aging. You're repairing the problem that were accumulated over the years. And you expect that if you manage to rejuvenate your skin by 10 years, then it will last for 10 years. That's basically, yeah.
It's an inside out methodology, basically.
Exactly. And it lasts much longer than traditional approach in that sense. So this is really, that's how you see it, biotechnology, in the sense that we're talking about pretty heavy solution. It's not easy to provide. You need to grow cells. You need like special super sterile labs and everything to be able to do it. In many countries, it cannot even be done because stem cells are not allowed. It has to be implemented in countries where they're okay with stem cell therapy, because it is kind of stem cell therapy.
And how long do you have to keep these cells isolated and rejuvenate them and then inject them back?
Takes 1 month. Cultivation process takes about 1 month. I'm also interested to the possibility of triggering special part of those cells to make them express exactly what I want them to express. So for example, overexpressing elastin. So elastin is a very long-lasting proteins, but it's mostly expressed when you're a baby, and then very, very few. Still a little bit, but not nearly as much as when you were younger. So if you could push it, even just for a short time, if you could push it, the expression of these, or if you could, for example, push a little bit the expression of telomeres, so just the telomeres of your skin cells get a little longer and last longer and basically get rejuvenated as well. Those are all kind of approach combined with this AFI that could make it even better.
People seem to be spending billions and billions of dollars on skin care, skin products, skin polishing, skin rejuvenation. But what you're saying is, look, all these are superficial. They work only on the surface. They work to a small degree and not on a long-term basis.
Yes, absolutely. And that's true also for aesthetic. Like if you think about Botox, you can't expect Botox to make your skin younger. That's just not possible. That's not how it works. And most of treatments that are available, I mean, of course, plastic surgery, it's even more extreme, but plastic surgery is literally pulling on your face, right? It's not, how can that make your skin younger? It's not possible. So there are, weirdly enough, very few solutions for this notion. It almost, need its own word. Like, that's why I call it skin rejuvenation. I want to make it clear that this is not, because the word anti-aging has been used by cosmetics for decades already.
Yeah.
And,
It's not
and
anti-aging. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's not anti-aging in that sense.
Right.
Even so, that's the general idea. But the
Yeah.
term has been abused, basically. So we can't use it anymore.
Yeah. Now let's get into the inner side of it. What exactly are longevity molecules? If there are any, what are they?
Longevity molecules. So when you think about longevity therapies, I like to actually talk about therapies more than just molecule, because molecule is one of the category, one of the weapons that we have in our arsenal. And stem cell therapy, for example, which are not molecules, are also one possible approach for these ways to try and rejuvenate at least the cellular level an organ, and on the long term an entire organism. So yes, senolytics are molecules mostly. You have, what else can be underlined? I mean, anything that targets one of the hallmarks of aging, basically. So I work on another project. I'm going to talk about it later a little more, but targeting protein oxidation is also something that is,
Yeah.
close to my heart for many reasons. I did many years of research on that topic. And this
Redox.
also kind of makes sense because proteostasis, that's the name
Yeah.
of this hallmark.
Yeah.
I mean, proteins are the tools of the cells, and they do everything inside the cells. Everything, like all enzymes are proteins, right? And they're also structural proteins. So if proteins get damaged, and they are, well, the whole thing will collapse at some point. So if you could at least protect them, and ideally also overactivate the system to recycle them, because you can't really fix them, but you don't have to. You just break them and they're going to make new ones. But, avoid aggregation, avoid this kind of thing, and clean up the entire cell. So those are also, let's say, target. And that's why when we think about solution for aging, we're more thinking in terms of targets. Then solution comes by themselves. Once you get a good target, you can try and approach it under different approach. So even molecular, you can look at molecule that specifically bind to protein and protect them. It's the research I've done based on extremophile bacteria. You can also try to overactivate autophagy and proteasome, which are the cleaning mechanism of the cells, which can be done with other molecules. And you can try to think about even, gene therapy based solution. And so that's the point. Like, you have a bunch of targets, all kind of different targets, and you have all kind of different weapons that we have in our arsenal. And for some, we haven't yet found the right one, the right weapon for the right target, but we know that we could search in that direction. And there's more and more options for us, I would say, as biologists in that.
I think the other aspect that we need to look at is the entire DNA aspect.
Mhm. Yeah.
When we look at aging, essentially DNA, and you mentioned telomeres, which play a critical role in estimating your age and also how many more years you've got,
Yeah.
with the telomeres. So what is essential would be for us to understand what role does DNA mechanism play as far as aging is concerned. And is there anything we could do to rejuvenate the DNA itself?
Yeah. So that's a very, very good question. And it's a very complex one, because the DNA itself is one big molecule, right? And aging, of course, like I said at the beginning, aging targets everything. I mean, concerns everything. So of course, it concerns DNA as well. In the case of DNA, there are several layers, and that you already mentioned some. So you have the DNA itself, so the code, and that's the main problem is mutation. So you have, through your entire body, and all your cells are exposed to mutation that happen during replication. So they are replication mistakes, so copy mistakes. Something bad happened in the cells, and they put a G instead of a C, and that's a mutation, right? Because only 10% of the DNA is actually coding for proteins, most of these mutations do nothing. So it doesn't really matter, but some of them do. And so when a mutation occurs, basically the cell that carry the mutation, because it occurs for each cell individually, either they can divide and then they will spread that mutation, or this mutation is so toxic that the cell will die, and then it's not a problem because the mutation disappears instantly, basically. Also, something that a lot of people kind of don't realize is that mutation only happen on cells that divide. because if there is no division, there's no replication, there's no possibility for mutation of DNA.
Right.
So, for example, neurons and muscle cells cannot mutate. They can't because they can't divide. They have this shape, both of them, that don't allow them to divide. A mature neuron cannot divide. So you get them for many, many years. So this one have other problem. They have what we call the accumulation of issue problem because they don't divide, but they don't have mutation problem. And so the solution when mutation occurs, we can't really target mutations that occurs randomly in different cells. If we have one mutation that exists since birth, then you have a genetic disease. That's something else. And that we actually can target because we can, if it's one problem that is spread all over the body, we can make, well, gene therapy, right? This one can target. But this doesn't apply to aging. This is a different story entirely, right? But mutation is just one little part of the problem. So the way that you can, let's say, get rid of those mutations is by selection. If the mutation has too much damage on the cells, either it will kill it or it will slow it down, and it can eventually be replaced by cells that don't have that mutation and so behave in a more healthy way. But that's just a part of the problem. So you also mentioned telomeres. So telomeres is just the end of the DNA molecule on the chromosome, right? And so this one they don't code for anything, the telomeres. They just the cap, and they kind of define the limits at which a cell can divide, kind of. And so they shorten with age. They can actually be resynthesized with telomerase, the enzyme that then synthesizes them. But if they don't, if they are not compensated for, they get shorter also with more oxidation. They are sensitive to environment. And if they reach a certain point, basically that's what causes the senescence. So the other problem that we mentioned earlier, the cells basically lose its capacity to divide and will start to really accumulate problems. And since it doesn't die, it will just spread bad stuff all around and influence the neighbors who didn't have originally telomere issue. So that's another category of genetic problem or DNA problem. And the third one, the one that is very, very popular right now, is the one that concerns what we call epigenetic. Epigenetic is basically still on the DNA, but it's not in the code itself. It's on the surface of the DNA. And I mean, there's different level of epigenetic, but most of the time people are talking about methylation. And so methylation are like small, very, very small modification that can be either added or removed. It's controlled by enzymes, methylase. And so it can be reversed. That's the interesting part. While the other two that I mentioned are very hard to reverse. And so this methylation occurs, and they are characteristic of different problems. So these are the ones that we use for the biological clock. So when we want to know the biological age, most of the time we use DNA methylation. And so why does it matter, this telomere, this methylation? Is because the methylation site, if it's on the right in front of the protein expression part, it will block it to be expressed. So it has an impact directly on how the cell will behave. And so this is gene expression. That's what my PhD was about, actually, gene expression regulation. So yeah, this is something that has, of course, big consequences. And you have some methylation that seems to occur in quite systematic way. So there seems to be some level of program and some that are random. And they will mess up with the whole system. And, the cell will stop doing what it's supposed to do and will do something else instead. So that's why it's problematic. But this one has been shown to be reversible.
That's interesting. We talked about gene expression. Now, methylation, reversal of methylation is one mechanism that we can look at. What are the other mechanisms that we are trying to influence? Or rather, what are the other mechanisms that could influence aging at a cellular level?
You mean beside this methylation thing? Well, there's we're discussing several options there, but
in the other aspect we spoke about was stem cell therapy.
Yeah.
Right. Are there any other mechanisms or any other protocols?
Yes. There's, not that much more, but there's some, yes. And basically, again, you have to go back to these hallmarks, and that's why they're considered now like really central to the biology of aging, because that give us an overview of where to look at, right? This discovery that we could target these cells specifically and kill only those ones. And of course, if you do that, you will actually rejuvenate. And the reason for that, and that's also something that conceptually is a little bit complicated, but once you get it it kind of makes sense, is this idea that the age of your organ or the age of yourself is the average of all the cells that you have. And so in a given organ, let's say a piece of skin, give an example that I know well, you have cells that are very young and you have cells that are already very old. So it's
Hmm.
completely heterogeneous. So if you kill only the old cells, the average age of your cells in that area will be younger. And so your
Right.
skin will have rejuvenated in that terms. And that's
So is there a way to do that?
they always, yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
typically the senolytics do that. They kill
Hmm.
specifically. So we have different kind of senolytics that have been tested. Some are pure. I mean, some are actually even common molecules. A lot of them are drugs, repurposed drugs. So drugs that were used mostly for cancer treatment, which is kind of funny, and have interesting potential for, because anti-cancer drugs kill cells. That's their job,
Yes.
right? So they're very good at that, sometimes a little bit too good. And some, in some specific dosage, tend to kill much more the senescent cell versus the non-senescent cell. So, which is a little bit strange because normally the anti-cancer drug kill the cells that divide faster. So I don't know
Right.
why they would kill, but okay, let's not go into there. But yeah, so there's research there, and most of them are based on molecules that are known, repurposed drug or natural compounds. Both of them are like
Hmm.
quite. And then there's also some approach that are more, let's say, design based
Hmm.
on peptide. Yeah. And basically this one was also, but the problem of this approach, because everything has its limitation, is that we are composed of many, many, many different cells. And
Hmm.
it's very difficult to imagine that one molecule can target all of these different senescent cells because they are very different. And also the very definition of a senescent cells is different from one cell type to another. In skin, for example, a cell that doesn't divide at all is most probably deleterious. So targeting senescent cells in skin is not a problem because cells keep dividing. But in liver, for example, in the liver, the cells don't divide much. They have the ability to divide if they want, but it's not their main job. They only divide when there's a problem, basically, when suddenly a lot of them died. And so if you start killing cells that don't divide and are semi-senescent, you actually will harm the liver because you will kill cells that are still fully functional or mostly functional. So there was a lot of question around that, basically, about. So we are trying to develop different solutions, but I believe that the future is in targeted solutions. So rather than trying to find one molecule that deal with everything, let's be precise. Let's target organs by organs. For each organ, its own solution. That's why I focus on skin, for example. And then
Right.
my solution for skin might not work for another organ, but it will give me ideas of what to do for another organ. But it has to be adapted. So we can't deny the complexity of biology. And that's something that as humans, we tend to do because,
Yes.
complexity is something that, except a few crazy people like me, you don't want to have in your head constantly. You want to
I,
simplify things and you want simple solution. So yeah, unfortunately that
I think complexity also happens. The more you know, the more complex it is.
for sure. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, I mean, there are other, yeah, there are other solutions. You were asking me,
When it comes to misconceptions, what's the one misconception that you see a lot and which you want to clarify to people?
there's a lot. I would say it's not so much misconception because I'm okay with people misunderstanding stuff. I actually enjoy explaining. I'm more annoyed with false claims, which are very similar to what you're talking
Yeah.
about. And there's a lot in our industry, unfortunately. And
Right.
this actually also handicap our industry a lot. When I say our industry, I mean longevity industry, right? The longevity industry is extremely broad, extremely wide, and
Hmm.
goes from basically spa all the way to biotechnology and
Right.
everything in between. And so that makes things complicated because you do have a lot of weird claims, including sometimes coming originally from science, but that were misunderstood. That happens a lot. So like, yeah, this notion that you're supposed to drink, I forgot what's the number, 7 glass of water per day. This is absurd. That just doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. I mean,
Yeah.
you live in India, I live in Croatia, and different temperature, different needs, different
Yes.
activity, different needs. And you should drink what you need to drink, and that's about it. There's no point
Absolutely.
of trying to drown yourself. I might talk about something like collagen because back to the skin topic, and people, you got collagen supplement, for example. And this is a complicated topic, but like the main misunderstanding from people, I would say, from the general public, was that you take collagen to replace the collagen that is in your skin. That's just not possible. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Because that's not how biology works. The stuff you eat don't end up in your organs. They get destroyed first. And proteins that are in your body are built by your cells. That's the only source of protein you can get. From food, you can get potentially amino acid that you need, of course, to build protein, no problem. But whatever the source doesn't matter. You could get proteins from any source. It still can be used to create collagen in your skin. There's no reason why you need collagen to make collagen. No, that doesn't work like that. So that's something that was getting on my nerve at the beginning, because at the beginning I was really frustrated by this notion that you're replacing the collagen you had by the one that you were eating. That's not how it works at all. But what does happen is that, well, to some extent, there's still some controversies, especially when it comes to skin aging. But you're right; it's also used. It's a different type of collagen, by the way. But yeah, in the joints and stuff like that.
For the bone.
Yeah, and bones as well. And so the idea is basically that all this collagen that you eat, which come from another source, by the way, we don't eat human collagen. We use mostly cows and other animals. And also there's no collagen in plants, just so we're clear. So there's no such thing as a plant collagen. It doesn't exist. So they all come from animals. So you see there's a lot of misconception, but okay, whatever. And basically this one that you eat might end up as peptides, so small piece of protein.
Right.
And they could send a signal to your cell that you have a lot of broken collagen around since you have so many this little. And that could send a signal that we need to resynthesize collagen. So that would be the only, for me, rational explanation why eating collagen could have any kind of impact on the amount that you have. And it also makes sense that, when you take a pill of collagen that contains maybe 1 gram of collagen, sometimes 2 or 3, if you take like the whole thing in your drink, you're made of several kilograms of collagen. Collagen is the most abundant protein in the entire body, because you have it all over your skin and your hair and hair is keratin, but like your organs everywhere, you got a lot of collagen. It's a very common protein. You can't expect that the few gram that you take can replace the one. Also, clearly this is a different story. So that's one example that I can give of like one but I hear them constantly and I like to comment on them, even to my colleagues, even to people in the industry.
Collagen is a good segue for us to talk a little bit about longevity supplements. Are longevity supplements ahead of the science? Are longevity supplements claiming far more?
Oh, right.
Than
Yeah. In that sense, I would say that, of course, there's also a lot of claims that are not true in supplements. There is a lot of the regulation around supplements, not the same as the regulation around drugs. So you can produce a supplement even if the claims are not, even if it doesn't do anything, as long as it doesn't harm anybody. Sorry for my French accent. Drugs have to have some effect at least. And basically for longevity supplement now, more specifically, you have some things that do work and that are really interesting scientifically, but there's few of them and not so many of them. And then you have also some that we don't know yet exactly what it does. So a good example is the NAD+. So NAD+ itself is not a supplement, but you have supplements that are the precursor of NAD+, like NMN, for example, and they are supposed to raise the level of NAD+ in you. So there is, because of the interest, there's of course a lot of science behind it. It's not 100% clear yet how much this impacts your health on the long term. Simply, we haven't done all the clinical trial, but there's like serious logic behind it, at least. And on animal experiment, we know that there's the correlation between NAD+ and a few aspects of aging makes sense. It's real, right? How does it impact taking it as a supplement? This is not so clear. How is it metabolized when you eat it? That's also another point that is very important. How does it actually reach your body and things like that? And then you have other supplements that are actually super basic. And I would say these one are potentially the best one. The one that are basically minerals and vitamins that are not even longevity supplement, but just supplements. And that's what a supplement mean. It means it's there to supplement your diet for things that you're potentially missing.
One of the things is that most of the time the supplement industry seems to take the plausible mechanism and mistake that to be a proven outcome,
Yes,
right?
that's
I
absolutely true.
think that's
Yeah.
that's where most of the industry goes
Yeah.
wrong.
And the cosmetic
Uh,
industry is the same. Except for the cosmetic industry, it's even worse because they're just putting some molecule that have some effect on the skin, and the skin is a wall. So a lot of things don't even get in. But
yeah,
in the case of supplements, yeah, they are being ingested. And so, yeah, we don't know to which extent they have effect. Then you have
yeah,
peptides. It's a different, a different world
yeah,
altogether. But this one needs to be
yeah,
injected because
yeah.
they are being completely processed by your stomach otherwise.
They're coming. The peptides are coming. But how should consumers think about efficacy in the case of supplements? How should consumers think about efficacy versus marketing?
For a consumer, it's not easy, I would say. And also, not all supplements are born equal. And it's not easy at all because, like I said, it's a less regulated industry comparing to pharmaceutical for sure. And so you get a lot of supplement that don't contain what's written on the label. They just get like a fraction of what's written, for example. And there's some study that have been done comparing different, like just literally randomly buying, including from good brands, and then realizing that the amount is not what's written on the label. So that's already a problem. Then you have the fact that for some supplement we don't know so well, or they just, depending the way they are formulated, whether or not they will reach the bloodstream at least, or the organs and
Yeah.
everything. And so that's also a problem. So when you're a consumer, you are faced with this, and it's very difficult, I would say.
Where do most longevity innovations fail? What's that fail switch that kicks in?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that question, to be honest. I mean, probably the same as in every medical research. There are costs associated to it. It's also, I mean, longevity research, like all research, is a matter of fashion. People don't necessarily think about that way. So sometimes what's lacking is pushing the weird ideas, or pushing the side ideas, at least the one that are not. So when something gets popular, for example, right now DNA methylation is super popular. So you get fundings, heavy fundings for this specific topic. If you put any kind of AI in there, that's even better. But if you're not doing that, if you're interested in something that no one else is caring about at the moment, even so, you're most likely to be into something more interesting because nobody else have looked into that question. Then fundings is actually the main limitation. Fundings for this research. And there's also something that's probably very controversial, but it's okay. I'm going to say it anyway. The fact that the longevity world has kind of two separate group. You have the pro lifespan and the pro health span. I don't know if you ever faced this
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of debate,
I've
right? And
seen that.
originally, I would say that the longevity science, that wasn't called longevity science at the time, it was just research on aging, and research on aging
Yes.
mostly, was actually mostly about trying to optimize lifespan, because health span is
Right.
kind of a side effect. You can't really keep prolonging lifespan without extending health span. It's not possible, right? So especially if your goal is to prolong lifespan indefinitely. So that was the goal originally, by the way. That's still kind of mine. So the idea that you could basically cure aging entirely. So that's why I say it can be controversial. But it's an interesting idea. Like, is it possible to just stop aging altogether, and not just stop it, and so that's only possible if you're 100% healthy. There's no possibility in which you can live indefinitely old. It's just not possible. It doesn't make sense biologically because old is weak. So you cannot live long weak. It's not possible. Later on, basically, this longevity rich medicine, and you have an entire longevity medicine group now. And medicine is not about living forever, clearly, first of all. And they are much more down to earth, which is good because they also went away from all the craziness. So I'm very happy that there's a lot of longevity doctors and MDs.
It's interesting what you're saying. I look at it at two levels, right? There's the health span, because obviously, like you mentioned, you cannot live forever if you're sick,
Yeah.
right? So for me, that's level one, where you say that, how do I get to level one where my health span has increased?
Yes.
That's essentially living without a disease. Maybe instead of living till 60 without a disease, you try and live to 75 without a
Yeah.
disease, right?
Yeah.
So that automatically sort of pushes your lifespan
Yeah.
boundary by another
Absolutely.
10.
Absolutely. I mean, the two are completely connected. If you're focusing only on health span, you're still going to live longer. you're still gonna have a positive impact on your lifespan. Yeah.
Yeah, I think ultimately it just boils down to the terminology. It's pretty interchangeable in
Yeah.
that sense. I clearly see two camps. Both are genuinely trying their own ways, but one is less gimmicky and which is more rooted in science, real possibilities as on date.
Mhm.
And the other one talks about living till 200 and so on and so forth. So that's the science which I stay away
Yeah,
from.
yeah, yeah, no, for sure. But basically, I would say the people who are claiming that they want to live for 200 are not usually the one that come up with bullshit solution, because no bullshit solution is going to bring you anywhere.
Yeah.
This is, those are basically two separate questions, like the notion of, so what comes out of this health span camp, I would say, that is actually very necessary at the population level. And I understand,
Yeah.
again, I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's great that it exists and that it's being pushed, and it has to be pushed. And I actually worked in that industry as well quite a lot. Most of the solution from this is actually common sense. It's like you have to eat better, you have to sleep better, you have to exercise. I mean, some people do need this common sense because they don't have it. And, even me, that I know all of that, sometimes I'm not doing it. Like, I'm not doing much sport, and I should. But so that's basically what can be frustrating for someone like me who is a scientist. It's like, okay, where is the complex biology? Where is the super cool biotechnology tools coming in this? And basically what they're telling you is like, you have to eat well, you have to sleep well, you have to exercise, and you have to also be careful of your mental health. All of it is completely true. And I actually recommend it as a first thing to anybody who is asking me what to do to be healthier. The first thing is that to go to the
Mhm.
basics, focus on those four basics, and mental health super important as well. And, you focus on that, already you're going to be healthier. And so once you're healthier, it's like, okay, but what can I do next? What's my next level? So that's, I agree with you that this is the step one, almost step zero, actually. That's the basic. But what's the step 2, 3, 4, and 5? That's basically what I'm interested in, especially as a scientist, right?
I'm still stuck a little bit on that rejuvenation aspect,
Uh-huh.
right? What does rejuvenation actually mean in scientific
Yeah,
terms?
that's a good question. I would say it depends how you look at it. A rejuvenation could simply be when you go from we defined earlier the biological age. If you can go from a biological age of 65 to a biological age of 60, technically you have rejuvenated somehow, whatever that means. But whatever that means, that's what you want to know, right? So it depends how it's measured. So in the case of cells, that's easier to measure. So when you look at biological age of cells, which also can be measured, there's no reason why not. You can, for example, you take my fibroblasts in my lab, you look at them, you take fibroblasts from 65 years old people, and you take fibroblasts from 20 years old people. They are different. You can see some difference already. Not, like I said, there's diversity in the population, but overall you can see trends. So one of the most obvious is that cells from older people, they divide slower, and their ability to resist against stress is much lower. So these are like the most obvious 2 points. And this kind of apply to people as well. That's the interesting point, right? But not dividing, obviously, but, overall metabolism being slower in older people than in younger one. That's also true for cells. So if you can reverse that, and on the cells, it's relatively easy to measure, then you have biological rejuvenation. So then if you take a specific organ, so let's say the skin, you can define what's a young organ and what's an old one through all kind of criteria. And if ideally all of those criteria are reversed, then you can talk about rejuvenation. So the problem with taking just biological age is just one piece of data. It's not enough to claim rejuvenation.
I have a point of view on biological clocks,
Okay.
right? I think, at least from all the research that I have done, so far, biological clocks are still a big question mark because they vary so vastly, even just methylation based
Mm-hmm.
clocks between the
Yeah.
Hogarths and all the others. There seems to be significant difference. So I'm really not sure whether biological aging is still a well quantified way to actually understand how old you are inside, how accurate it is. I
Yeah.
think, yes, to a certain degree, it pushes people from a marketing perspective, it's great, but I'm not so sure from a
Yeah.
scientific perspective how well validated
Yeah.
those
So
clocks
I,
are.
I would say that the concept itself is very important. for a
Right.
scientist is very important, and it
Right.
can potentially fasten the entire research on the top page. The tools that we currently have available, they are evolving all the time. Clearly, the let's say the original one are, I mean, we can see that they vary too much, and depending, you can take DNA methylation, but you can take others, and you will say that you take the same test 3 times, and 3 times you get different numbers. It's not there yet. I agree with you. It gives you like a general idea, but even that, we're not completely sure what to do with that. And the
Yeah.
question is like, is our biological age the sum or the average of all the biological age of our
All the
organs?
individuals.
That's debatable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we know that they are linked. We know that the aging of some organs will influence the rest. We know that, but it's interesting to know that if your general biological age is, let's say, 10 years older than you actually are, which sucks, that could be due just because your liver is not working properly. And so that you
Right.
can get. So I would say that the future, but it's not even the future, it's already happening, but we don't hear about it too much because it's still very complex and very expensive, is multi-omics. So multiple source
Yeah.
of data from like really different. So omics is really my
Yes.
background. I was in transcriptomics, so gene expression, but they're all kind of similar in some ways. You have genomics, which is about the genes. You have the metabolomics,
Radiomics.
which is about all the small molecules, proteomics about the proteins, the microbiomics about the microbiomes, right? So all of this
Right.
information, if you manage to combine them, you would get a more precise idea. You can go much more deep than that, but we already know that some blood markers give you a good insight on the state of your liver. We have like specific markers for liver health, but what's missing in classical medicine that longevity medicine is trying to bring on is this idea of combining all the data and integrating them into something that makes sense. And general medicine cannot do that simply because the doctors don't have time or even the training. They are not
Yeah.
educated to do that. I mean, they have been trained to solve specific problems, not understanding a
Right.
whole. And this is different, way of thinking, and they are simply lacking the training for that.
We spoke about rejuvenation,
Yeah,
right? Can cells actually regain
yeah.
function, or are we in for a slowing decline?
No. So that's a very important point. There's the question that I think anybody who entered this field should ask is it even possible? And that's the question you're asking right now. Like, can rejuvenation be possible? The answer is clearly yes, because we've seen it. I've seen it in my own lab. The possibility of making cells younger from all the criteria that we can measure. Yes, we can do that. No question. We can do that. And even on some small organism, to some extent, we can do that. And also what's interesting, in nature, you can find example of organism that can rejuvenate naturally. So there's no biological impossibility of rejuvenation. So that's actually a very big question and a very important answer about the possibility. So it doesn't mean that we can have access to it yet, but there's some things that seems impossible. And like in physics, it's more clear what can be possible, what cannot be possible. Right? Time travel seems to be physically impossible for several reasons.
Theoretically, yes.
Yeah, that's the point. If it's theoretically impossible, maybe we simply miss information to go against that. Okay, that's the point. But if
Right.
with our current knowledge, it's impossible, that's already like a big no for the next, But in
Right.
biology, okay, first of all, we don't know as much in biology as we do in physics. But with our current knowledge of biology, there's nothing that tells us it's impossible. There's actually several signs that tells us it is possible. We've seen life extension of organism for, quite a lot. And we have cases in nature of organisms that either are non-aging or barely aging, or even some that can, in some specific condition, go back to childhood almost, like some medusa, some, jellyfish that can turn back into polyps and stuff. You have examples in nature that it's possible. And then, yeah, like all of the things that we are testing, for example, we're talking about DNA methylation earlier. The rejuvenation of the cells by these 3 or 4 or 5 factors, this was shown very clearly. There's no question that the cells were completely, not just the methylation was rejuvenated, the entire cells were rejuvenated by only touching this. So yeah, it is possible. The question is, how do we go from this pure bench science to applying to us?
Yeah, I think the question really is how close are we to meaningful intervention?
I ask myself every day. It's really, really hard to answer that, especially as a scientist, because we want to be, honest and clear. What I've seen in my lifetime, like I told you, I was interested in that topic since high school. So that's for me 30 years. So for 30 years, I've seen what the science has done and everything. And so there've been progress in science quite a lot, not only in longevity, but also in longevity. But there've been also a lot of like big change in the way that money is spent towards these goals. So we went from only a few crazy scientists would care about that to entire industry putting billions into it. And so that makes a huge difference. And if you want to parallel, there's two that can be used. One is cancer research. Like cancer research have made tremendous progress. Even so people think, oh, but people are still dying of cancer. Yeah, but cancer is not one disease, it's 1,000 diseases, right? But the number of cancer we can treat and the survival rate post-treatment has increased dramatically. Really, it's really, really due to very complex biology and biotechnology, right? So it's possible, it's there if you put, but we've put billions and billions and billions in cancer research because it was killing too many people, right? And another example I like to think about is AI. Like AI has been out there for 50 years. I know it's it's hard to believe, but it's true. So, there've been like research and it's been going like small peaks and then nothing for a couple of decades and then another peaks. You and I are, I guess, somehow similar age. So you remember when a computer beat, I think, Kasparov at chess, it was in 97 or 90 something. It was like a goddamn long time ago. When this happened, I was like, that's it, AI is here. And it wasn't.
Talking about longevity, are longevity clinics advancing science or are they simply packaging aspiration?
Yeah, most of them are not doing any science at all. They're just applying, their clinics. They're not there to do science. I know a few who are basically combining their clinic with R&D center and most importantly, clinical trial center. So I'm guessing that those are the ones that you're thinking about. And there are not so many.
Right.
They usually put them in some remote places where they allow them to do a little bit crazy stuff, right? Usually on islands. And well, I mean, are they helping the science progress? I would say they can. I don't know if they are because, the problem is that humans are greedy and sometimes they're doing it just because to make a few bucks, not necessarily to advance science.
The other challenge we have in longevity science clinical trials is simply because of the fact that we don't have a symptom, right? Unlike
Yeah.
regular clinical trials where there is a disease or there is a problem and then you
We
fix
do
that
have
over a period.
symptoms, but the problem is that it takes time before we can see the results. Yeah. Yeah. Because we do have plenty of symptoms. We have plenty. Between 8 years old and 20 years old, you can see a whole plethora of symptoms. But the main problem is that,
Right.
the effects are probably as slow as aging itself. Like you expect that rejuvenation
Right.
might follow a rate that is not so far from aging itself. So it will take time. Even just for Parkinson and Alzheimer, which are like clear disease with clear markers. I mean, those are still like slow evolving disease and it's hard to do the clinical trials for those diseases compared to cancer are like 5 or 6 times the price of because of that time factor. The fact that it takes so much time before we can see something. Yeah, that's also another problem. We still can't cure any single neurodegenerative disease. Yeah, not even a little bit.
Talking about results, how do you see longevity science evolving over the next decade?
I mean, I'm looking for the next big surprise. I would say this is what I'm always looking for. Again, as a scientist,
What do you think is going to be the form of? What do you think
where
that's
is it going to
what do
come
you think?
from?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the whole problem of surprise. Like he could have predicted 10 years ago that DNA methylation would have been such a big deal in longevity. It's not possible for anybody to have imagined that. Maybe for people who were specifically working in that field, but beside them, there are like so many things going on.
What excites you the most and what concerns you?
I'm naturally very, very optimistic. And I guess I couldn't be a scientist otherwise, especially a biologist. Biologists have to experience failure constantly. So if they are not optimistic, it cannot work, right? So that's, all the progress. I'm excited about what could come up as a treatment from this methylation therapy that are not therapy yet. In theory, that would be one thing that could be really, really cool. But many other things could be really interesting as well. And the combination and the use of all this new like antibody therapy and cell therapy, and there's like all of that. I find it all fascinating. There are some research recently about they managed to do some level of rejuvenation of monkeys, which are like our close cousins, obviously. And when something happened on monkeys, you can start to get excited, basically. Mice, you have to wait a
Right.
little bit. And this idea was about basically first cleaning up senescent cells with a specific antibody approach, not the classical senolytics, and then injecting specific stem cells that would take the place of those cells that just been wiped out and would transform into those cells because they were like very.
Mhm.
So like this is the kind of thing that keep me excited, I would say. And it's closer to what I know, it's closer to what I really understand. So I feel like, oh yeah, I can't wait to test that even. And what
Yeah.
scares me, not much scares me, I have to say. What's something that does scare me is like, what if it will take more than my lifetime to find a solution? Okay, that is something I'm afraid of.
We're almost approaching the end of the episode. So we have a little tradition at Brighter 100 from Longeny where we ask a few rapid fire
Okay.
questions. These are more personal questions, so you can answer
Mhm.
them. If you could put one message on a global billboard, what would it say?
Take care of your health. I mean, like from early on, from the moment you're a teen, focus on your health, and everything else will be fine.
What belief about aging have you changed your mind about?
I used to think that mitochondria will be the main thing to target. I used to work a lot in mitochondria. I still think that they're very important, but I've learned so many more things since that. I've even mentioned them during our talk. So I guess this is something I've evolved with. Yeah.
Talking about mitochondria, initially I was very keen on mitochondria. Again, you mentioned NAD plus, and I was very interested in all those aspects. And I still believe that, like you mentioned, it's not just about
Mhm.
one thing, right? It's
Yeah.
mitochondria plus
Yeah.
it's all combined, right? And most of us make that mistake of saying, yes, this is the thing that will solve your
Yeah,
aging problem.
exactly.
I think that magic bullet doesn't
Absolutely. So
exist.
I'm lucky enough that I come from a background of like multiple science. So I never really thought that a single solution would be the best one. But when you're into your science, you tend to, of course, love your theory a little better. So I worked on mitochondria. I worked on protein, like I mentioned earlier, and I worked also quite a lot on autophagy and things like that. So those were my favorite three. For a while, I was kind of focused on this, but I'm always open on everything new that is coming.
What advice would you give your younger self about health?
It's okay. I'm pretty healthy. Probably take care of your sleep earlier on because that was my main weakness. Strangely enough, it should be do some more sport, but I'm still not doing it now. So there's no point of me telling my younger self to do it. But yeah, I guess I started caring about my sleep around my 40s. And that was actually a problem for at least 10 years before that. So for
All right. Francois, thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful having this conversation with you. And I acknowledge all the great work that you've done. And I hope you continue doing so.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to talk with you, Anil, and I hope we'll get to do that again.
Aging is not something that suddenly appears, it's something that builds day by day, decision by decision. And maybe the shift we need is this: to stop thinking of health as something we fix later and start thinking about it as something we shape every day. Because in the end, it's not just about how long we live, it's about how well we live. This is Brighter 100 from Longeny. Until next time, stay curious, stay consistent, and stay brighter.